We all have been watching a ridiculous amount of TV and movies, streaming everything. Want to find out what it was like being on shows when they first ever came out, way back in the day? And want to learn about what you should be watching this holiday weekend and through the summer? And what's coming up in the fall? And how does live sports play into all of this? Find out this and a little bit more coming up next. I'm Eric Mitchell, and this is To The Point. It is Fan Friday, and we have a good one for you. We're getting back in our time machine with Doc Brown, and we're going back to the 60s, before even color TV started. And then we're going to hop in our time machine and head back to today. That's right, I'll be wearing the same thing. And we'll show up, boom, we're here. We're going to talk with a great TV critic who's been on our show a number of times. We're going to talk about what just came out today on July 3rd, what to watch over this holiday weekend, and what you should check out, some good recommendations from an expert, what you should be binge watching in July. We have a lot to cover because we have a lot going on in the world. And let's start, before we jump into the show, one of the big things I want to talk about today is the need for laughter. There's so much negativity in the world, and it's very hard to watch the news. The news makes you want to get sick, because if we're not filled with what's going in 2020, or what the orange man in the White House is doing, or what the strange man who smells people is doing, or just any of the craziness that goes on before with COVID-19, and nobody seems to have the right answer on what we're doing, the pundits, the experts, everybody, then we throw in Black Lives Matter, pride, and everything else. Everybody has an opinion, and apparently we're all wrong, according to anybody who we talk to on social media. It's never been more important to take your mind away from it, choosing on however you do it. Now, I'm going to be honest. TV's not a priority in our household and never has been. We spend our time doing other things, whether it's creating, reading, writing. Now, we do watch TV. And if you look at our viewing record, you would probably see on Netflix that we binge watch The Office, the American version, more than any other people on the planet. Safe to say that we watch it every day in our house, and have for the past several years. But that doesn't mean we don't love watching good recommendations. In the past, I found myself falling madly in love with Apple's TV channel that they released. And of course, who doesn't love Disney+? HBO's always been solid with The Sopranos and Game of Thrones. Throw in Showtime and their amazing app, and you can always get Billions and some other shows that they put out. Throw in Hulu, throw in Amazon Video, throw in all the things that we have, and you have TV. But with our first guest today, we're going to talk about when you didn't have all these options, over 500 to choose from. And satellite TV was something that was unheard of. And cable? What the hell was that? They didn't even have color TV. And commercials were by cigarette companies and Procter & Gamble and companies like that that you don't see today. So our first guest today is Butch Patrick, who, if you're playing trivia at home and you're curious, played Eddie Munster in the Munsters, which we're going to talk about the Munsters. And the Munsters came out, and they weren't on that long, 2 seasons. They came out, and then the Addams Family came out right behind them. Such an interesting thing to see. Both of them had short shelf lives of 2 or less seasons, which is incredible to think about. We still talk about it to this day. But our guest, Mr. Butch Patrick, he has played in many things, and I'm so excited to talk to him because the fact of the matter is he worked with Walt Disney as they were launching their TV, which is amazing if you know all their movies and TV series they did. A lot of you watching may have grown up watching the Mickey Mouse Club, while others have watched the second version of it that didn't have a net. We got to watch the ones with Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears and J.C. Chavez and that other Christina Aguilera. Look, I know. That was 4. I almost said 3. I was like, you're going to pick on me that I can't count. I can't. That's 4. So we grew up on that. And now look at the TV that we're at today in 2020. So going from few to many. So I'm excited to welcome our first guest and get to the point with Mr. Butch Patrick. Well, welcome back to our Fan Friday, and we have Butch Patrick with us today, and he was Eddie Munster. From his hat, you'll see it says the Munster. So let's jump in, and we're going to talk about what's going on and how much the TV world has changed. And well, I don't know if Butch wants to share how many years it's been.
55 years ago, I started in 1960. I did the Munsters from 64 to 66, but I worked from 61 to 75.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I mean, you've been doing that. So what was it like being on that show, right? When you talk about the Munsters, you're like a cult favorite. Still, people know, the Munsters and talk about it, and I still see them on TV.
Yeah, the word, the cult really doesn't do it justice. It's more iconic.
Okay.
It's very globally received. It's into its third generation of fan base. One of the most heavily merchandised shows of all times. The most valuable collectibles are on the market. If you go looking for eBay Munster stuff, it's really pricey stuff. So it's endured really, really well, and it's basically a very family-friendly, multi-generational evergreen show.
That is for sure. I mean, a lot of people watch it. I mean, I don't want to age my parents when I say that they watched it, but for sure they did. I mean, your show was on a little bit before I was brought to the earth, so it's.
Well, that's why syndication has been so good to so many of us old shows. I mean, I grew up with black and white television, switched over in 1966 to color, and the Munsters was in the last 2 years of black and white, which actually did it justice because it was a better show in black and white because it resonated like the Universal monster movies that they were so good at doing in the 40s.
Awesome. So let me ask you. So you've seen this. So you just mentioned we're talking about transitioning from black and white to color, right? And you think about that wasn't so long ago. The 60s, that wasn't a long time ago. I mean, if you think about it, it's 40 short years ago.
Well, and you got to remember the black and white genre is still used. Paper Moon, Raging Bull. There are certain filmmakers and scripts that really lend themselves to the black and white genre, and it's good. I mean, some of my favorite movies are Sunset Boulevard, black and white. There's some good movies.
Oh yeah. So what's your thoughts on how the landscape of television has changed, right? From when you were on to where we are today. 2020, TV's so drastically different. I mean, even as a kid growing up on it and remembering how certain words were never used, certainly body parts were never shown, and now TV seems to be like you can't tell the difference between HBO and regular TV.
Censorship, yes, and if you actually go back into I was watching a special on Mae West the other day, where in 1935 they went from what Mae West could get away with to what she couldn't get away with because the studios had switched. The censorship board had come into play, and everything was Shirley Temple at that point. So the Mae West humor couldn't be done. The Shirley Temple was in, Mae West was out. But along those lines, in the 60s, the censorships were still. The censorship board was still around with, there was no profanity. There was twin beds for the parents. The Munsters was one of the first, if not the first family to sleep in a king size bed together. And a lot of other things occurred. But as far as the comparisons between now and then, certain rules are the same, and everything else is pretty much out the window. The same rules apply with the working process and the work ethic with dialogue, knowing your lines, hitting your mark, being on time, that kind of thing never changes. But the techniques and the technology from old film, the Munsters was shot on film. It was actually done like little mini movies. The same lighting effect, the same crab dolly, the same crew. Today with technology and digital and CG, a lot of the things that you see really aren't really there. Where in the old days, it was pretty much what you see is what you get to a point. But the amount of cable and the amount of internet and so all the things that go along with technology-wise that draws your attention away from the old school television, things are much different in that respect.
Absolutely. And you guys so let me get this straight. So I'm aging myself here by being young, so forgive me for asking these weird questions. You guys were on right around the same time as Batman, right? The original Batman that was on the same slot. So you guys kind of filled that amazing TV slot. There was Batman.
Batman was actually the reason we went off the air. We were on for 2 years very successfully. Batman came in. They put Batman up against us, and he hurt us in the ratings. Combination of going to color, who was going to pay for the color? Were they going to switch the Munsters to another day? Fred and Al were New Yorkers who were transplanted in L.A. I believe they were homesick. I think everything contributed that they just decided, let's not do a third season, but we'll make a color movie, and we'll introduce the rest of the world to the Munsters so we can sell a syndication package, even though it was only 70 episodes and they like 100.
Oh. See, it's so cool to see how TV, like, people don't see that part of TV when we talk about it, and how we look at all these shows that came out that are now, like you said, you know, these are legendary shows that live in like almost folklore to so many of us when we talk about it. And you see these shows being remade. I know, I guess, and was it 2012? NBC was trying to do some sort of reimagining of the Munsters.
The Mockingbird Lane project, yeah, and it had been done before with some movies, but the Mockingbird Lane is a good example of a lot of money was spent on that show, $10 million for a pilot, big money. I mean, you could make a movie for that, you know.
Yeah.
And the fact that they had A-listers with Brian, the director Brian, oh God, there was Brian Fuller and Brian Singer, I think. No, who directed it?
I'm trying to find that out.
Brian, he did all the X-Men.
Yeah.
Brian Singer? No. Maybe it was Brian Singer.
I think anyway, it was.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, Brian Singer, Brian Fuller, writer, creator. They put their tools together. They did a great job. They got an A-list cast, and they still couldn't make it fly. Universal is very finicky about how the Munsters is perceived to the world because it's a good cash cow for them, always has been, with the merchandising and the licensing and the theme and this and that. I went on the set the last day of the shoot, met everybody, and the funny thing was I was sitting next to Sir Ian McKellen watching the shoot, and he was asking me questions about what it must have been like back in the day doing the Munsters the old school way with the old cameras and stuff. And that was quite a moment because here I am, you know, Sir Ian McKellen. I mean, this guy's like God, and he's asking me questions about the old days, which I thought was pretty cool.
Heck yeah.
But to answer your question, the Munsters. It's tough to, whenever they try to do a remake, whether it's the Munsters or anybody else, you're always going to be compared to the original. And the original was so good. I mean, I was just casting it as a kid, but it was so good from the technical standpoint and the writing and the acting and the special effects and the makeup and everything else, the music, that it will never be topped. And it's tough to do that. And the purists prefer the old original, and the remakes are okay for kids that never saw the original. But I was hoping Mockingbird Lane would fly because I had a part in it, but unfortunately it wasn't to be.
That's crazy because you see how they. I mean, I like that you covered that people don't realize that the original is always the preferred. I mean, I know for me, a lot of films I prefer the first generation of them. I don't want to see them done over again. So so if you don't mind me, how old were you when you started acting on the show?
I was 11 and 12. I was born in '53, so I started acting when I was 7 in 1960. I did a year of the Real McCoys. I did a year of General Hospital, and then the Munsters came along. Did a couple of years of that, and then I continued teenage years over at Disney and My Three Sons, and just guest starring roles in movies and commercials like everybody else.
Yeah, you have done quite a bit as I look through your biography. As you've done quite a bit. You are so Disney. Can we talk about that? Do you mind talking about?
Sure. No, Disney was the gold standard. If you were a kid at Disney, you would you'd hit the mother lode. So I was very happy to spend a couple of years over at Disney.
That is so. What was that like? Because that was like the heyday when Disney was really like catching their step to get into it. I mean, even as a Disney.
I remember vividly, like Kurt Russell was so happy that he got his driver's license the day I was out there. He was showing everybody his first driver's license, and he was doing. I mean, he was the Corcoran brothers and Kurt Russell. They were big stars. I mean, I was doing World of Colors and guest starring roles on the one and only original Family Band with Leslie Ann Warren and Walter Brennan and stuff like that. But I wasn't a Disney kid star. I was just a working kid out at the Disney Studios. But I did star in a couple World of Colors 2-parters one summer, which was pretty unusual because they usually didn't let the same actor kid be in a regular role right after another one.
That's so. I mean, I love your bio. Kind of checking through all your filmography because you are in The Monkees, which I love. I love that. My story to that is when I was in the Marine Corps, and this is in the late '90s. I was sitting in a bar late. I know, shocking, a Marine in a bar. Stop me if you've heard that story. But I'm sitting
Hoo-ah.
here, and next to me was Mickey Dolenz, and he was shocked. I knew who he was. I was like, I saw you. And he's like, how did you see me? You seem kind of young to say you saw
Yeah.
me. I'm like, it was like 5 years ago in Orlando, and you guys were the opening act for Weird Al Yankovic. And he was like,
Yeah.
yeah. He's like, true story. And so we ended up
Yeah.
spending, it's like, I don't really get to talk to people your age that know who I am. And I'm like, I was raised on the Monkees. MTV put it on. And that's how I mean, my parents
Yeah,
talked about it.
I was very lucky. I did an episode that I'm very proud of. It was a Christmas episode, and the reason for it, number one, I got to work as an equal with them for the whole week because they were supposed to be babysitting me, and I was supposed to be a very adult-like child. I was about 14 at the time. But if you see the episode, what they did, what I liked the most is they sing at the end a cappella Riachu, which they did very, very well. Their harmonies were great. But at the end, they introduced everybody from behind the scenes to the world to share their Christmas wish with everybody. And that was really how much fun they had working on that show. It was a very campy, and I had been working a long time, so I knew, a happy set from a bad set. And this was an amazing experience for a 14-year-old kid to work with not only the Monkees, who they were like God. And number two, it was so nice that they showed everybody to the world who puts on the show and how easy to get along with they were. It was nice.
That's so cool to hear these stories. So let's talk. So you were also in a film that was one of the first kind of animated I don't know how you want to call
Phantom Tollbooth.
Yeah, Phantom Tollbooth. So that's like one of the first, right, where they had animation and live.
Well, no, they did a thing. Disney did that with Song of the South.
That's right.
They animated and the live stuff. They did a few, and Mary Poppins did some too. But it was very early, and it was kind of groundbreaking because number one, it was a very successful book, and number two, Chuck Jones, it was his only feature film. And Chuck, he's like the master. You can't really talk about animation without including him in the top 2 or 3 of all time. So to work with Chuck and the voiceover people that I watched cartoons as a kid, and working with the people that I knew their voices but never saw them, was a real treat for me. So
Yeah.
that was a big 2-year window. I did Monkees and I did the Phantom Tollbooth, and I did a lot of Disney work in that little 3-year window from about being 13 to 16.
And you had Mel Blanc on that cast. I mean.
Oh yeah, Dawes Butler, Mel Blanc, June Foray, Hans Conried. A lot of good people.
Wow, the name Mel Blanc sticks out for those of you playing at home, younger generation. That's Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig. I mean, that's just outstanding. I mean, those are all. I mean, talk about an amazing. I mean, you have an amazing film. So what do you do now? I mean, here you've done all of this amazing stuff. What does a child actor? We always talk about this. We see the child actors on TV, right? I mean, what are you doing now? What?
Well, if you're a gearhead like I am, I always wanted to be a race car driver. Acting was just a temporary job for me to save money to buy a race car. So, unfortunately, I'm old enough to have been in the last draft to go to Vietnam, and I had a very low number. So I was pretty much convinced myself I was going to go over and get killed. So I went and spent the money because I figured I wouldn't be coming back to my race car career. Lo and behold, when I went in for my induction physical, they found out that I had a bad knee from a skiing accident, and I was incapable, and they gave me a 1H deferment and said, we'll be calling you in 6 months. They didn't call me. I didn't call them back to remind them they didn't call me, and the war was over, and I was left buying and selling muscle cars, which I still do, except now I handle a Munster coach and a Dragula. I go around the country with a 34-foot trailer with an escape room, a Munster-themed escape room in it. And I'm developing a tour now with a gentleman named David Merlin, who's an illusionist. So we're going to do a Magic and Munsters escape room combination, showing Munster Go Home and doing a 4-hour theater tour.
Wow, look at you. Keeping busy.
And help people through this COVID-19 thing by bringing them back out to a little bit of normalcy versus through the Munsters and movies.
See, that's awesome. It's good to have people out there doing that because we need that. We're just stuck in such negativity with everything going on in the world. You turn on the news, it's just all bad. So it's good that you're out there bringing, and it's good. I mean, are you seeing younger fans know who the Munsters are?
Yeah, that's kind of I have a book called Munster Memories that came out September 24th of 2014, which was 50 years to the day of our premiere. And what I did is I put together a book of the stories that kids had shared with me. And when you come to it, one of the reasons I enjoy doing this is interacting with the fans. And surprisingly, kids who are introduced to the show through their parents or grandparents or whatever seem to enjoy it a lot. So we're good with the next generation, but what I get the most out of is the memories of people coming up to me and saying, my grandfather's gone, but some of my fondest memories as a kid were watching the Munsters with him. Or, I got into hot rods because of the Munster coach. Or I got into makeup and I love Halloween because of this. So there's a lot of people had really good memories of the show, and you find yourself an extended member of their family in a good way. So I'm very blessed in that respect, and I figured out a way to actually run with it. I mean, some celebrities come to an autograph show with a briefcase full of pictures. I show up with a 34-foot trailer and 2 cars. So I can appreciate. I appreciate the people, the first in and the last ones out. Like the Load. The Jackson Browns, the song "The Load."
Yeah.
I'm that guy. I'm the first one in and the last one out.
I love it. So do you keep up with any of the living cast from the Munsters? Do you still talk to?
There's only one, and
beside...
that's Pat Priest, and I do speak to her. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, that's good. So I mean, let's ask, because I know I was raised. I know your character, but I was really familiar with. Hold on, I gotta remember Grandpa. Munster.
Al Lewis.
Al Lewis. There you go. You know him by his real name. I'm like, I didn't know his real name, but I mean, how was it working with him? He seems like he was a screen legend.
He was great. Fred Gwynn and Al Lewis were a comedy team that were, when you go back and watch them on Car 54, they were really, really good at what they did. And then those characters that they got to portray allowed them to go, beyond the normality of a comedy team and do some very funny stuff with the makeup. Fred and I weren't close after the fact because he kind of shied away from the Munsters, where Al embraced it somewhat like I do and opened a restaurant and ran for office as Grandpa Al Lewis and had his comedy clubs and his radio show, and Fred pretty much went back to being, a solid actor, but he wasn't. He didn't want to be known as Herman Munster, even though it was very hard for him not to be known as Herman Munster because he did such a good job. But I learned a lot from Fred and Al both. Al taught me about life. Fred taught me about acting. So it worked well for me to be around him for a few years. It was a good experience.
I'm just laughing because I know my memory of him is also what he's probably doesn't want anybody to remember, or anybody, I don't know if people remember 87, but when he was on Howard Stern's program as a reoccurring guest, and his famous thing that he was yelling into the microphone until Howard took the mic away. Yeah. F to C. F to C.
Howard's trying to grab the microphone back from me. He had just gotten back on the air, and Al's like, it's like the Zapruder film. Howard in slow motion, give me the microphone.
Oh, it's great. I want to thank you for joining us today, Butch. It's been great kind of jumping in here, learning about shows that I watched, which is funny. Your show, The Munsters, was actually on AFARTS when we were deployed and sailing around the world on an aircraft carrier. These are the shows we watch, these old black and white shows. You guys, of course, Andy Griffith. I mean, I think that's like...
Well, it's funny. A lot of people always ask me, what do you attribute the success of the show from? And I go, well, the Munsters was part of a period in the 60s that was just gold for comedy television. You had Talking Horses. I did 2 Mr. Eds, My Favorite Martian, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched. I didn't do a Bewitched, but I did the others. So comedy and comedians, when you look at some of the guest stars we had on the show, I mean, we had like A-listers, or Harvey Korman, Don Rickles, Frank Gorshin, Paul Lynde, really good people early in their careers came on the show, and it was because it was funny and it was good comedy, and people wanted to laugh, and they wanted to come home, and they wanted to be entertained, and there wasn't internet, and there wasn't cable. There was just 3 channels and a TV tray, and the TV set was the entertainment center of the household, and it was a good place to be.
Love it. And you had Dom DeLuise on the show.
So he replaced Paul Lynde. That was one of Dom DeLuise's first roles. And then, and also before I go, I have a YouTube channel I want to plug a little bit called Coast to Coast, where I go around the country and find interesting Americana stories and this and that with my Munster coach. And it's spelled with a K, Coast to Coast. And then behind me, you see Keys to My Castle, among my Munster stuff. This is my sister's company. Great gift-giving stuff. It's front door keys that are artwork and very cool, to where if you're interested in something, please visit her site. And on that note, we can close out.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. For everybody wondering where those links are, we're going to provide them in the YouTube channel below. We'll have your YouTube channel and the link to your sister's store also, so folks can go grab that stuff and find it all in one, and go out and watch these old Munster shows. Come on and go see you. Do you have a website or anywhere people could find to see
Munsters.com.
There we go. Munsters. Look how easy that is. Did you get that like when it first came out?
30 years ago,
yeah. I was going to say, you must have got that early, because I'm sure some.
Yeah, I'm revamping it, but it'll be up and at 'em in about a week. But you can always find me on Facebook, and you're going to put everything up that I sent you.
We're going to have it all up there. So I want to thank you so much, Butch, for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been blessed. Thanks, bud. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a great one. Stay safe.
Thanks. We spend a lot of time streaming. Over the last few years, cable companies have really felt the push for us to cut the cord. And in the last 13 weeks, more and more of us are doing it, with outlets like YouTube TV, Hulu live streaming, and the countless others that are out there. Plus, you have Netflix and Amazon TV. You also have HBO and Cinemax teamed up to bring you HBO Cinemax or HBO Max, whatever the bleep they're calling it. Stars. All these networks, including NBC releasing Peacock later in 2020, have these amazing streaming platforms. So the need to stream has never been higher. Much like having Top Gun 2 come out, we feel the need for streaming. See what I did? You missed it. It's Fan Friday. I'm supposed to do this thing. Anyways, we have an amazing guest today. Marc Berman is here. We're going to talk about why more and more folks are cutting the cord, and two, what to watch this summer. So when it's dark and you're in your house, after you've worn your mask all day, you sit down, what do you watch? What is out there? What are our options? So learn more. We're going to learn more. We're not going to learn more after this message. No, we're going to learn more, and we're going to welcome to the show our amazing guest, TV critic Marc Berman, coming up after these messages. Welcome to the show, Marc. How are you doing today, bud?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I am looking forward to the 4th of July. This year doesn't feel like it has the same buzz the 4th of July normally has. Fireworks. No. Just 2 short years ago, my family and I were in New York, where we like to spend our holidays because we have family there. My little brother lives there, so we go around his work schedule since his is less flexible than the rest of us. We were there. We watched the Macy's fireworks. We actually stayed at the Dominic in Soho, which we were up on a higher floor and had a beautiful, number one, the Dominic is a beautiful hotel, but just an amazing view of the fireworks. It was so powerful. It's something my kids still talk about to this day. So the 4th's a little different, but we have good TV coming out. So I guess we'll make up for it. Excited today. We'll talk about it here in a second. We have Hamilton comes out today on Disney Plus, so excited about that. We always get excited about Disney Plus stuff in my house. It's anything Star Wars, Disney, Marvel related always wins. But let's talk about the sad news this week in the passing of Carl Reiner. Amazing movie and TV star. He will definitely be missed, even as an older gentleman. Most millennials, you'll recognize him from those Oceans 11, 12, 13, however many movies they did. But you'll recognize him in those movies, and those of us a little bit older will recognize Carl from so many amazing projects that he worked on. So what's your thought on him passing and the legacy that he left behind in TV and movie?
Well, you know what? Let's look at it this way. Carl Reiner was 98 years old. That's a good age to live to. Nevertheless, it's very sad because you know what? He's one of those TV pioneers that really didn't get the credit he deserved. And I'm going to give him that credit now because he really was on the forefront of television. He was on a show back in 1950 with Sid Caesar. And that was on Saturday night. It was a Your Show of Shows, it was called. It was a live 90-minute sketch comedy. Remember, this was 1950. This was 70 years ago. And the show ran for 4 seasons. It was an enormous hit. And it was 90 minutes of sketch comedy. So to the people out there that seem to think that Saturday Night Live was the forefront of that type of comedy, that's totally not true. Your Show of Shows was it was 1950, so anything you did was really different. But it was funny, it was popular, it was just so comically brilliant. And Carl Reiner appeared, he acted, he performed, and he also wrote for that show. And that was, 1950 to 1954. Unfortunately, we don't ever get to see it because it wasn't produced in a way that is conducive to having repeats. So, I have to give him, hats off. That show had a lot of different talent on it. He worked with Mel Brooks on it. And, to this day, he and Mel Brooks were very good friends. Mel Brooks just turned 94. Thankfully, he's alive and well. And then after your show of shows, he went on to another Sid Caesar show called, it was Caesar's World, I believe, or Caesar's Place. That ran for a number of seasons after that. And again, he started writing on that show. He worked with a young Woody Allen. Woody Allen was one of the writers. Neil Simon was a writer on your show of shows. So back then, he was on the forefront of comedy. But of course, he's remembered for creating the Dick Van Dyke Show. And a little bit of history on that. I won't get into it too much, but he played Rob Petrie in the pilot, or Rob Petrie, however you pronounce it. It had a different title. It was called Head of the Family. It had a different cast. He was Rob Petrie. CBS didn't pick it up. So Carl Reiner retooled it as the Dick Van Dyke Show. And you have to remember that the Dick Van Dyke Show premiered in 1961 at a time when the top-rated comedy was Hazel. You had fluffy family, mindless comedies. You had the Beverly Hillbillies was the #1 sitcom in 1962, and Dick Van Dyke was a sophisticated comedy about an adult couple at home and his relationship at work. So it was something we never saw before. It almost didn't get renewed for a second season. CBS wanted to cancel it. Procter & Gamble sponsored it. They, protested. CBS brought it back. It immediately got into the top 10 in season 2. It lasted for 5 seasons. It could have lasted way longer, but Carl Reiner decided, he wanted to, leave while he was still ahead. And then he went on to a very prolific career in movies, both as an actor, as a writer, as a producer, as a director. And this was a man that, he wrote books. He just was a producer, director, writer, a little bit of everything. And of course, he's the father of Rob Reiner. So there's a lot of talent in that family. So I really have to take my hat off, so to speak, for Carl Reiner, because he's a pioneer in our industry. He never really got the attention he deserved, in my opinion. And today's Thursday. Tomorrow evening, CBS will be honoring him with 2 colorized episodes of the Dick Van Dyke Show, beginning at 8 o'clock.
Ooh,
so
that's awesome.
Well, you know what it is. It's sad because in later years he appeared on Hot in Cleveland as Betty White's boyfriend on the show, and Betty White, of course, is also 98. She's a few months older than Carl Reiner, and it gets you to thinking that all these pioneers from yesteryear, unfortunately, you can't live forever, and it's sad to see them pass away. I mean, Dick Van Dyke is 94. As I said, Mel Brooks is 94. Look at Norman Lear, he's 98, and Carl Reiner was in that club. Mm-hmm. So congratulations to him. He had a 7-decade career, amazing talent, and I wish somebody would repeat. I wish they could show us your show of shows. So
absolutely, that's good. And while you were talking, I was curious on his amazing career. He literally, besides his son being ridiculously talented and bringing us some of the best movies ever, what is crazy is to go look at through all of the movies. If you think about the folks that he's been with, The Jerk with Steve Martin. Of course, the Ocean series, the 8 million that they made, those were actually funny. He was a hilarious character in all of them. Just the way that they brought him in to be part of this young, hip gang. Oh God, the man, he did a lot with Steve Martin. I did notice that as I'm looking through this. He spent a lot of time doing stuff with Steve Martin. You've got Where's Summer School. These are all great. Summer Rental, movies that I just loved growing up watching as a kid. And TV shows, talk about, he was one of the OGs, started it all, and talking about Dick Van Dyke. But he was also in 2.5 Men, which I didn't even realize when you start talking about shows that were successful and funny. He's always been part of it. So, Ally McBeal, he's just been everywhere. So his loss was truly felt. And yes, 98 is a long time to live. And the Dick Van Dyke Show, what's great is to see Dick Van Dyke still popping up and things, which we all love Dick Van Dyke. So it's great to hear. I never knew that Dick Van Dyke was almost canceled. I never knew that in the first season, because I remember watching that with my grandparents. Of course, it was syndicated because this was in the 80s, and I was born in the 70s. But watching those shows, it's like I spend a lot of time, and I tell my kids, because we talk about older TV shows that I like to watch. And, part of our interview today, we also have Butch Patrick, who played Eddie Munster of many acting roles. is the guest who follows you today, and just learning about the '60s, and when he talks about I worked for Walt Disney, like he didn't just work for Walt Disney Company, he worked for Walt Disney, like the actual human, the physical brains behind TV, and hearing about how we transitioned from black and white. 40 short years ago, TV was still black and white, and we'd made this conversion over to color. And then you've got to see how TV has, Mark, you've watched so much TV. Just a question that comes off as we transition from Carl to kind of what you talk about. What do you think of the way TV's changed so much, right? You take from Carl starting in the 50s when TV was brand new, right? And sketch comedy, 90 minutes, sponsored by cigarette companies and Procter & Gamble. Things you don't see now. The Texaco guys, right? Running out and the Texaco commercials. How much would you say TV has changed? And if the folks that created this and started this back in the day could go back and go, what do we have now? Where nudity and profanity was forbidden, and now it's on. It's even on network TV. It's very common. I remember when Ellen kissing another woman was the most controversial thing ever. I thought NBC was gonna burn to the ground, and now it's 2020, and you look at what we're putting on TV now. So, what's your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I want to say the one thing that I love about TV from yesteryear, and the Dick Van Dyke Show is a perfect example of this. It ran for 5 seasons, which is not an enormously long run, but here's the nice thing about it. There was 158 episodes. So back then, a typical season was 30 episodes, 32 episodes. And it's interesting, you mentioned Butch Patrick. He was on the Munsters. This is an interesting fact that nobody really realizes. The Munsters and the Addams Family, they premiered within a week of each other. They each only ran for 2 seasons. That's it. But you had about 72 episodes because back then you did a lot of them. So that's the one big thing that I really miss about the older days is you had, when you had a TV show, you had a season running from September through May, through sometimes June, and it's not like that anymore. But I do want to say, and I just want to say one more thing about Carl Reiner, because this is such a cool fact that I don't think a lot of people realize. He played Alan Brady on the Dick Van Dyke Show. He also played Alan Brady in a guest spot on Mad About You in 1995 and won an Emmy. So I think that's kind of that was really a nice, kind of a way to end the role. But in terms of TV itself, and I say this all the time, I think some of the best television in history comes from yesteryear. And it's not to say that we don't have some really good content now, because we really do. But if you look at again, we mentioned the Dick Van Dyke Show. We mentioned your show of shows. You mentioned, I Love Lucy in the 50s. Then you went into the 70s. You had all the Norman Lear stuff. You had Mary Tyler Moore. The 80s brought Hill Street Blues, 30-something. And there was something about each of those shows that was so unique and different.
So, Mark, one of the big things is we have a lot coming out. It's the 4th of July weekend, basically. I always think, I know summer starts technically 2 weeks ago. We started summer, but it seems like July 4th is really when we start kicking in more and more releases. I know typically movie releases have come out. I remember Independence Day, the first one. I don't recognize the second film as a movie because that thing was horrible. But the first Independence Day, everything comes out around this time. So today, July 3rd, we have Hamilton was released early, much like the Michael Jordan documentary was pushed forward into April, so it gave us some sports. We have Hamilton this weekend starting on Disney Plus, like we talked about earlier. I know Apple's releasing a couple new series. Just last weekend, HBO released, which was perfect timing, and I'm pretty sure they did it on purpose, kind of like Space Force launching Space Force and then launching SpaceX the day of the next day release. Perfect timing, by the way. But HBO just did the Golden State Killer, started that series, which if you haven't started watching it, I highly recommend. I completely didn't realize that was Patton Oswalt's, his wife who passed away, who did this documentary. It's a great doc, but we have Hamilton. What else do you see? What are you recommending this weekend? If we're sitting at home, obviously more things are getting shut down than open, so more time at TV. What's some talk about some oldies but goodies that are out there, and then we're going to get to your top 5 list. But what are you kind of thinking? If you think of Americana, what films are you watching during the 4th of July weekend?
You know what film I always watch during this weekend? It's just something that I enjoy the beginning of the summer. I'm a very, very big Alfred Hitchcock fan. And I just, I always, seek. I would actually go to the theaters and to see his movies because there's something about watching a Hitchcock film in a theater and seeing the reaction. Rear Window, to me, is a summer film. Jimmy Stewart, and it basically, I'm sure everybody knows the story of this, but it's a summer film, and it's probably my favorite Hitchcock film, and that to me always signals the beginning of the summer. The same way, once we get to Labor Day, my classic film is Picnic with William Holden and Kim Novak, because that took place during Labor Day, so that ends the summer. But to me, it's always like, my go-to destination always is TCM, because I think, I was watching last night, I was watching a Gene Kelly musical with Debbie Reynolds, Singing in the Rain. I feel like during a pandemic, during this, which we're hopefully getting out of now, or moving past it, I like innocence. I want to feel good. I want to feel happy. That's Americana. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers was just on TCM that I DVR'd. So to me, it's a lot of classic. A lot of old movies, a lot of TV series. Any holiday weekend like this one is the Twilight Zone. There's always a Twilight Zone marathon. My only complaint about that is they run the same episodes, which are brilliant. But there's so many episodes of the original Twilight Zone. Give us more variety. But of course, there's a lot of original content. And the first thing I have to recommend is I had the opportunity, the last time we spoke, I had recommended Dead to Me on Netflix. And I watched the second season. 10 episodes each season, so it's easy to get past. I absolutely loved it. It was so reminiscent to me. Let me go back. It reminded me of the old serialized dramas like Knots Landing, or really Desperate Housewives. There was, a lot of, it got a little kooky in the second season, a little over the top, but oh my God, it is an absolute addiction. It's an absolute addiction. And then, of course, we're not going to the movies this weekend unless it's a drive-in movie. People are not going to be flocking to the theaters, so there's so many different options out there to watch. The Netflix, this is not a movie, but Netflix is introducing the Babysitters Club, which I know a lot of people are looking forward to, about a group of teenage girls that I think is something worth seeking. And as always, Netflix is the go-to destination. They have so much content. Hulu actually just announced the second season. It's a satirical comedy called The Great, which I actually like. If you haven't seen the first season, I would check it out. I talked about Unorthodox last time. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's only 4 hours, and you're going to get through it in one sitting because you're not going to be able to put it down. I also recommend going outside and getting some air and getting some sunshine and walking around. And, we've been cooped up for so long in our houses. It's been about 4 months already, but the beauty of this era of peak TV, we have over 500 scripted options of programming available to watch. And there's so many different places to go. And if you want to feel good, if you want to just escape, go back to, the good old days, go to Disney Plus. They did such a good job of debuting, of having great content, and it's just working to their advantage. It's gotten a lot of buzz. If you haven't seen The Mandalorian, which is also called Star Wars The Mandalorian, that's something that you would probably definitely want to watch. So many different things that you could catch up on. Yeah. And, one show, we don't have a new season, unfortunately, but I will always recommend The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh, yes.
Have you watched that?
I absolutely love. My wife and I started watching that, and we were blown away by the acting, the cast. It's a fabulous show, and it makes you feel good. It's tastefully done. It's funny. You find yourself kind of watching it, not knowing what to expect, kind of getting that Mad Men vibe from it, and then you just start laughing because here she is, and again, tells an amazing story from an era I was not alive, but always wondered, because we talk about comedy. I love comedies. I love laughing. There's nothing better. But when you think about where we've come, from George I was raised on Robin Williams, Carlin, Billy Crystal, Whoopi. To me, the funniest human beings on earth was watching those three stand on a stage during something called Comic Relief in the early 80s. Robin Williams and Billy Crystal together was just, I don't even know if they turned that into a drug, people would OD. It was amazing to watch because they're so good together. But, watching these comedies from older was great. And I think that's what Marvelous Miss Maisel really touches on is here's, divorce and all these other topics. I don't want to blow it for anybody who hasn't started watching it. But Amazon has crushed it on that, and The Man in the High Tower. I think they absolutely, when it comes to Amazon, those are the two shows that I always tell people is like, if you haven't checked those out, go. Because you get these Disney haters that are like, I'm not watching Star Wars, I don't like Marvel, and I'm like, well, if you like DC, go over to HBO Max. They've got all the DC there. I mean, it's so nice now, and as I said in the beginning of the show, I was talking about, we live in an era where streaming is the way to go. I mean, literally, if Netflix doesn't have it, you can go to Hulu, and there's a good chance Hulu has it, and if Hulu doesn't have it, you can head over to Disney Plus, and if Disney Plus doesn't have what you're looking for, HBO Max has everything on the other side of the house, and then you start adding in these other amazing networks that have blossomed up. I mean, Amazon TV is amazing. I mean, there's just so many options we have now to watch TV and stand alone and get what you want to watch. TV viewing has never been better. It's
but that said, something to keep an eye on is Peacock.
Yep.
Now, Peacock had a slow launch, a slow rollout to Comcast subscribers. They're going to be launching nationally on July 15th. So that's now less than 2 weeks away. And what's very strange about Peacock, which was just announced yesterday, they've acquired a number of shows from the CBS Viacom library, which really makes kind of no sense because they're a competitor, and you would think the CBS Viacom product would go to CBS All Access. But on the flip side to this coin, basically, is there's so many of these streamers now that you have to pay for. So you really have to cherry pick now, which ones do I want to spend money on? If you're going to choose all of them, you're going to have a hefty bill every month because $10 here, $8 here, $12 here, it adds up at some point.
Yeah.
But I could check out Peacock, particularly if you're a fan of the Dick Wolf product.
Yeah.
Dick Wolf has, right now he has 2 FBI shows on CBS. He has 2 more Law and Orders coming out on NBC. Well, one on NBC, one on Peacock. He's got SVU's going into, season 22 next year. If you like that kind of product, go to Peacock. They're going to be doing A Brave New World. They're going to have a series based on the book of the same name, which might be interesting. And again, that's going to be launching on July 15th. So if you want to check that out, you have another option to go to.
That's awesome. I didn't even know that they were launching on July 5th. I haven't kept up. Yeah. Obviously with COVID and watching all this stuff, and honestly, we're big Disney fans in our house. A lot of our family works for the mouse. So, and we just love that product. And like you said, one of the shows that I can't say enough about is The Mandalorian. Star Wars, The Mandalorian. It's addicting. You fall in love with this little green creature. It's like automatic. I've talked about it on Fan Fridays before with our friends from AMC's Comic Book Men, Ming Chen when he was on. We all geek out on Baby Yoda. That's where you find out. If you haven't taken the time. That one, I really like The Golden State Killer. I started watching that. Amazing documentary. I'm into that. I really love these murder documentaries. HBO, they have the good one. They also had, I can't remember his name, the famous New Yorker, or infamous. He was the bad son of the real estate team that he confessed to murders accidentally with a hot mic. I forget his name. He was killed his wife. He's crazy. Richard something, or I forget his name, but I'll put it in the notes when I remember. But just so many amazing TV coming out. So it's hard to pick which one, and you're right about streaming. It's so easy for me. I keep doing these 7-day testers, and I just binged. I cheated totally, and I'm confessing my sins right now to the TV critic. But I love Billions on Showtime, but it's hard to justify the expense when that's the only show on Showtime I watch is the series Billions. I absolutely love that cast. They have, the guy who plays Axelrod on the show is one of my favorite. He was in, Band of Brothers, which I think he did a fabulous job. Again, I ask the question to anybody is, why do the English actors always do our accent better than we do our own accent? Because I had just like, what's his name from Walking Dead? He's an Englishman. It's funny, all the English guys are really ridiculously good at our accent. So it's...
Well, that reminds me of a show on Showtime that's going to be streaming on Peacock, which again is a little strange, The Affair.
Yeah.
You had two UK actors on that show that sounded they sounded better than we do here. But that was a favorite show of mine. I didn't love the last season, but if you haven't seen The Affair, it really tells you the story of what happens to, a supposedly happily married guy with 4 children, and he goes up to the Hamptons for a summer vacation, meets a local waitress, has an affair, and then everything falls apart after that. And it just, that's a show that I was glued to the TV every time that came back. And again, that's going to be streaming on Peacock. You had 5 seasons, I believe, so you have about 50 episodes. So that could keep you going for a while. But what's interesting about Eric, about all of this is you have an outlet like Disney Plus. What they did right was they introduced original shows that seemed to work. And we talked about The Mandalorian with a very vast library. What Apple TV didn't do was they came out with some very good product. The morning show with Jennifer Aniston has certainly gotten a lot of critical attention, and I actually really like it. But other than that, can you really think of any shows on Apple TV? So they didn't have a library.
Yeah.
And then every streamer is a little different. Apple TV, this is not the primary business for them. They're not as concerned about this. Same thing with Amazon. But of course, it's a different story for Netflix, which survives on subscribers. And let me tell you, Netflix is just through the roof. I think there's about 183 million subscribers now. They went up significantly during COVID-19. They've gotten a lot more subscribers, and well-deserved. So when it comes to recommending shows, my suggestion is, find a streamer, find an outlet that, that has the type of shows you want, and get yourself a nice cup of coffee or a cold drink and a snack and sit there. Because if you know what streaming does that drives me crazy, like with Dead to Me, the episode ends, then you have like 5 seconds before the next one begins. So by the time you grab the remote, the episode began and you can't get up.
I think that's why we end up watching season after season of The Office accidentally, because it just goes and you're just like, it's one endless episode of Dwight and Jim and Michael Scott. So, it's one of those things. So it's funny that you talk about one of the shows I really liked the past few summers, and it's kind of fallen off, which I was disappointed to see, was Animal Kingdom. I love that show on TNT. It was like Last Ship. Last Ship was good the first 2 seasons, and then I understand it became a money thing with one of the leads, but Animal Kingdom, amazing series, really crossing almost every line that you could cross. Of course, TNT's like, yeah, that's our job. We're really good at doing that. But it's a really good series that I think is, I don't even know if they're doing, I don't think they're going to release. I don't think they filmed. I think they canceled that show, or I don't know. I haven't seen any advertisers for it.
From what I understand, it's still alive. It's interesting because once upon a time, TNT had some really good dramas. So did USA. Because USA had a bunch of cookie cutter like a Royal Pains or Monk or whatever. But it really worked for them. TNT started coming out with some very good dramas. I'm still annoyed at them for screwing the remake of Dallas and not giving us a finale. They left us on with a cliffhanger. But then ultimately, everyone started talking about Netflix, and then the other streamers. And now a lot of these shows that you would watch on cable, you could now watch on a streamer because they have the library. So when you talk about a streamer, the library is imperative. It's imperative. It's not just about looking forward to the new shows. Ultimately, I'm counting down the days to when Stranger Things comes back, but they haven't even filmed the season yet, so I have a lot of days I'm going to have to wait. But there's so much there to choose, and so many different places. So really, the winner, the winner out of this whole COVID thing is Netflix. Yep. Wow, did they really step up to the plate? They had so much good product out there. However, I'm going to say this till I'm blue in the face. This could be another conversation. Network television is not dead. It's not. It's not by any means, not in a long shot. And then the next equation is live sports. Oh, it's going to start rolling out slowly. We're going to see baseball, NBA stuff. You're going to start seeing little by little. Yep. So, but then again, it's going to be kind of strange to see it without anyone watching it, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, and I wanted to talk about sports before we get your picks. But it's interesting because you have the NBA started officially yesterday. Everybody started going back to training camp. You're seeing the videos. It's great. You're having more and more players either test positive. I believe the number just came out They had a record 348 people have tested positive for COVID within the NBA, which is amazing when you start thinking we're going to have training camp for the NFL starting soon. Spring training is obviously going to start happening again. So we have sports all converging for the first time in July, which typically July, if you're a sports fan, you're competing with watching baseball. And the last 4 or 5 years, or actually 7, I've done some work with them, so I don't want to offend them. CrossFit, filming their CrossFit games and airing that. Not a big, just a niche brand, but that's typically your sports in July. Baseball and that. You have the traditionally, right around my mother's birthday, which is in a week, is the All-Star game. So you have the Home Run Derby. And we don't have that this year. It's a 50-game season, and it's all really quick. But it's going to be interesting with TV how that affects the viewing for the first time ever, having all of these sports basically on top of each other. With the NBA, the NFL is rumored to, they have not confirmed it, but they're chopping 2 of their 4 preseason games. So Game 1 and Game 4 are now out. They've canceled the Hall of Fame game. So one of our producers, Butch Seltzer, is not very happy. His Pittsburgh Steelers that he was going to go see in the Hall of Fame game, he can't go do that, but I guess they're going to do it next year. It's going to be interesting when we add all this in, TV, and now movies being brought straight over with, like Hamilton. That was supposed to get released to theaters, and Disney said, we're going to put it on. Let's do it July. I mean, those are the folks, I think, that are leading the way. Apple, I guess, has a couple new shows coming out. Tom Hanks is in one, I believe. I need to research that before I run. I just know I watched a preview of it. But, a lot of cool things. But before you go, we love your list. I know so many folks out there are like, okay, we watched Mark's recommendations. You got to get them. So I know we talked about one, and I always talk about The Office, so it wouldn't be complete if one of your recommendations did not include Mindy Keeling or someone from the cast of The Office. So what are your go-to picks that you're recommending until you come back on our show, which will be in a few weeks, so people have a couple weeks to watch so we can get feedback? What are your shows that you're recommending on this episode?
Well, you know what I want to recommend, not because I think it's the best show. It certainly is not. But if you were a fan of Unsolved Mysteries, and that ran on NBC for a number of seasons, it was quite successful for them. And it kind of talks about, what you were, this whole crime aura. There's a lot of interest in crime solving, and that was rebooted on Netflix, and it just began. It just started streaming this week. And you have a season of that if you really want to check out Unsolved Mysteries. I watched the first episode. I wasn't a huge fan, but I think if you were a fan of it, I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I think that's something that can entertain you. There's a show, you talked about Mindy Kaling. I have a real problem with the title of this show, and I'm looking at my cheat sheet because I wrote it down. Never Have I Never? Is that what it's called?
I think that's it. Yeah, Never Have I Never. We can just that's what we'll claim it. We're going to claim that that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. We're renaming the show for value that they didn't name their show. Easy for us to remember.
Well, you know what? It's a really cool show about a teenage Indian girl. And, it's kind of a coming-of-age story, the trials and tribulations and her life and, her family. And, I don't want to give away too much of it, but it's really like a nice nostalgic slice of life. And it's and what I really like about, the environment around it right now, there is more diversity, which is critical, because I think what shows need to do, which they not always have, is they have to show the world as it is. So that's one show that I'm really, quite proud of, and I think that's worth checking out. I have to mention again, I've said this already, I said it before in our other podcast, you've got to check out Dead to Me. If you haven't seen it, I just think, it's dramatic, it's funny. Linda Cardinelli is, outstanding. So is Christina Applegate. So I would watch that. If you're a Star Wars fan, I would absolutely check out The Mandalorian and stick with Disney Plus, and that you'll have hours of entertainment, in terms of in that category. And again, I mentioned Unorthodox last time. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and check it out. And Little Fires Everywhere on Hulu is another show. Not the best show out there, but a show that's going to keep you at the edge of your seats. And the way it ends, it leaves you hanging, which means there better be a second season because I'd like to know what's going to happen. And then, of course, all the off-network stuff. So if you want to just have a grand old time, or you want to just watch a good comedy, check out The Office, or go to Hallmark and watch I Love Lucy. I still laugh at those episodes. I've seen them how many times already?
Heck yeah.
And thankfully, I wasn't alive at the time All of Lucy was on live. But, I mean, there's nothing like an old comedy to just, kind of like take away your troubles and you'll forget there was even COVID-19. And then again, of course, our conversation would have been so different if we didn't have the pandemic, because we'd be talking about the Summer Olympics.
We would be. Which would be starting this very month, about 2 weeks away, was the kickoff. Crazy that we're going to have the 2020 Olympics in July of 2021. That's going to be a mouthful, and they're even marketing it as the Olympics of 2020. I don't understand that.
That's even worse than never have I never, or whatever that's called.
That is never have I ever. Yeah,
never have I ever, not never. Never have I ever. Okay, watch it. You'll like it.
We'll go with that one. But you're right. The Olympics, there's just so much that's been changed. COVID-19 has changed a lot. But you're right about watching older shows. I find myself doing that. If I see a Dick Van Dyke or, what was I just watching? Carol Burnett show was on. And I don't know how it ended up. I was up late the other night working, and I was surfing YouTube TV. Love my YouTube TV, by the way. And it was there, and I clicked it on, and I was like, sometimes just the humor. I mean, even being raised on like Archie Bunker, right? Like that humor, speaking of a Reiner, as we started the episode talking about, right? Just kind of, you watch these shows and you just laugh at the snarky humor. But a lot of it, which is scary, a lot of the topics talked about in the 60s and 70s could actually be present today in a lot that we're talking about. I mean, a lot of barriers were broken through, color barriers were broken through, just so much thanks to the likes of the Dick Van Dyke Show and, Mary Tyler Moore and even the Jeffersons, who we haven't even talked about. I mean, if you look at all these shows from the 60s and the 70s and what they've been talking about and put the date as today and update what they're wearing, they're still talking about the same things we're talking about. It's funny how television tells our story and we can kind of watch it. So it's interesting.
Well, you could watch, if you'd like to watch the Carl Burnett Show, you could watch every weeknight at 11:30 on MeTV. And I remember a few years ago, I interviewed Vicki Lawrence. My favorite skit, hands down, was The Family with Mama and Eunice. And I remember talking to Vicki Lawrence, and I couldn't get through the interview without cracking up, because every time I talked about one of the skits, I would laugh. But I just want to tell you, I love TV trivia, like tidbits. I just have to tell you one thing about the Jeffersons. I'll make it very quick.
Sweet.
And this is interesting. You're going to be shocked when I tell you this. When the Jeffersons began in 1975 on CBS, let me ask you this question. Isabel Sanford played Louise, and Sherman Hemsley was George. How old do you think they were when that show started? Each of them in real life. How old do you think they were?
Late 20s.
How about this? Okay, Sherman Hemsley was 36, and Isabel Sanford was 57.
Holy Toledo, really? Wow.
No wonder why Mother Jefferson hated Wheezy. She robbed the cradle.
She did?
She was older than him.
Wow, I never knew that. That's like the trivia when people talk about not Hill Street Blues, but 21 Jump Street with like Johnny Depp and all those folks. When you watch those shows and you're like, Johnny Depp was like a baby in that. I mean, but then you see him in Platoon, which a lot of people don't believe me when I say he was in Platoon, and he was. Yeah. He was very young in Platoon, but he was in Platoon. But that's interesting. I did not know the age difference like that.
There's a ton of those age things. There's so many examples, but. And honestly, I think one of my favorite interviews with a classic star, when I spoke with Isabel Sanford, oh my gosh, did I enjoy that? Yeah. Was that a great conversation? But so yeah, if you want to just escape and just there's so many places you can go for all this nostalgia, and then you have the diginets, like I mentioned, MeTV. Yeah. You can go watch the Waltons every day, which is what I do, because I just like happiness. I like a happy family. So there you go.
I love that you brought up one quick one that we've been watching here. We introduced our 13-year-old boy and our I hate to say this, she's almost a month away from turning 16, and you know what I'm talking about, so you feel my father chest pains. That father chest pain when you say 16 and daughter. But we found HBO Max, which we like. I mean, it's really an ugly logo. Like, they did themselves no favors in making that thing look attractive, in the colors and but it's just not eye pleasing. But they have the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on.
Oh.
And to watch that as remembering watching it growing up and loving it, thinking how cutting edge Will Smith is young. But my wife and I, our kids started watching it and they started like, wow, you guys wore a lot of bright colors. But wow. And all of a sudden we start watching, especially season 1, you got Don Cheadle as his best friend besides Jazzy Jeff, right? Don Cheadle, who has Oscars, but he's playing some thug from Philly, right? And it's just funny because you go through and you remember guys like Damon Wayans and those guys. Everybody was typecast back in the day, especially Don Cheadle. I mean, he was always like a gangster, like, some sort of like tough guy. And now he's completely different. I mean, he's a Marvel comic book hero now. So it's interesting to watch it, but Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is so refreshing because it crossed so many lines in the 90s. Yeah. And it was funny to do it. And our kids, having never seen it and not being raised around it, and us watching it again in almost new eyes, it's very refreshing. So I'm telling you, if you kind of like, okay, maybe the older stuff we've talked about isn't your thing, go watch some stuff from the early 90s where you start seeing what we're talking about today, officially today, was amazing on TV. What Will Smith and that show did, which people kind of frowned upon, but has a crazy cult following, they crossed every barrier you could cross. He was a judge. Carlton was, his own character. Hillary as, the gold digger. And then Will, who's like basically like every teenager today, but was Will Smith, who was unheard of at the time. I mean...
Well, it's interesting. I was working at NBC at the time, and another thing Fresh Prince did, which people don't realize, was it really stressed the importance of demographics, because Fresh Prince and Blossom, which led out of it, brought in an enormous teen base, and NBC was thrilled at the time to get all these young viewers that were watching these sitcoms. It never was a huge, total audience. It wasn't getting 20 million viewers. It wasn't certainly like what you got on Must See TV on Thursday, but it was bringing in teens and young adults, and NBC was really happy with that. And then the one thing I have to mention about Don Cheadle, as long as you mentioned him, do you remember him on Golden Palace?
Yeah, right?
That was the spinoff from the Golden Girls, and he's working in a hotel with 3 of the Golden Girls. I'm like, what are you doing here in this hotel? And the season, it only lasted 1 season.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny to see these guys before they come and telling our kids how at one time Saturday Night Live did have a competition with Mad TV trying to do the same thing. And if you look at that Mad TV cast, some of it's actually, their humor level is more cutting edge. And almost, I was telling my kids how Saturday Night Live during the time of Mad TV had to up their game to get as edgy as Mad TV was doing, because you remember what they were doing. I mean, that cast was amazing and on edge in the things they covered, and Saturday Night Live had to up their game because at that time they were having that lull after Adam had left, and Farley and Spade and Rock. I mean, an amazing Saturday Night Live cast. But I still watch those, and that's another thing. I don't know why we didn't recommend this. This is Eric's recommendation: old Saturday Night Live episodes. My kids laugh at the Jeopardy that Will Ferrell did with all of those amazing cast members that they've had there, with Norm Macdonald, who I wish him the best in a speedy recovery. I hear he's having a pretty major fight with cancer at this time. Norm Macdonald, the Tom Hanks episode where Tom is a host and he shows up and he's a contestant on there. Jimmy Fallon. Just the folks that they get to do it. And the Sean Connery skits are to die for. The Burt Reynolds. Saturday Night Live wins on those older ones, or the old skits with Adam and Rock and Spade and Farley. When you watch Farley cause all of them to break character so often, it's amazing when you go back and watch and see. Chris Farley was one of the funniest people I've ever watched. And to watch him make Adam Sandler break character over and over again, I'm pretty sure it was a game that they played, because they were really ridiculously good at getting each other to break character real fast.
Well, I still think probably my one of my favorite skits on Saturday Night Live, and I don't want to admit this, but I'm old enough to remember watching the original episodes in the mid '70s. But I remember the skit Coffee Talk, when Roseanne and Madonna were and Mike Myers was talking about
Coffee Talk,
Barbra Streisand, and then she popped in.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, and Mike's reaction to it was so, but that's good. I mean, I tell my kids, like, go watch when Michael Jordan was a co-host, right? I mean, they have him in front of the mirror, and he's like, I'll be better today. And it's just funny to have, that was the first time you saw athletes show up on Saturday Night Live. And since, it's been great because you saw Peyton Manning's been on there. I mean, it's just Saturday Night Live is something that takes us all, because I've watched those original episodes and those episodes in the 80s. And, Joe Piscopo, who's kind of an unknown, but his skit as Sinatra with Murphy as, Stevie. It just is, it's humor that makes you laugh. And I think we need laughter. As much as I love a good murder show in true crime, I love laughing. So turning on those and YouTube, you win because you have them all there. And it's just watching it, going back and seeing like Jimmy Fallon before he's Jimmy Fallon today.
It's amazing when you stop and think of, look, the show started in 1975, so do the math. It's 45 years old. It's never going to end.
Not quite. Hey, it's not quite. We're going to say it's 44 because some people's birthdays are from 1975. Maybe the host of the show. So we're going to call it 44 years old because it makes me feel better.
Yeah, but let me put it to you this way. It's going to outlive us all, that show. And it kind of takes us back to the original conversation we had in this, this week, was back to your show of shows. Because if viewers had the opportunity to see that show, they would talk about some of the skits. But then everybody remembers SNL as being the forefront of sketch comedy. And, of course, in late night, nothing can compete with it. But man, oh man, there is, and so many of those actors have gone on to such big careers. I mean, that's a stepping stone. If you get on that show, oh my gosh, you have so many open doors after that if you can manage to get on that show. And it shows no signs of slowing down. And then the question, of course, is what will they do this fall? Yeah. Are they going to shoot without a studio audience? I mean, how are they going to do it? So that's the next question, but we'll have to wait and see. We still have a few months to worry about that.
And again, Netflix wins because a lot of their cast has done stand-up sketch comedy on there. Like the Weekend News folks both have stand-ups that, by the way, if you haven't watched them on Netflix, go check them out. They are hilarious. They're very poignant and on point, filmed right before COVID-19 hit. So, I mean, it is funny, and we didn't talk about this, but hey, it's my show. We can go a little long. I was watching Billions in one of the final episodes because they split the series in half, which they had no idea COVID was hitting. I mean, it was talked about in the final episode as they split the series and they're going to film the second half, which is going to be interesting, how they're going to pull that off. Kelly Coyne, he's awesome. He plays Dollar Bill. He's also on The Americans. He's a fabulous actor. His father was a politician. Shout out Rip City because he's always supporting the Portland Trailblazers, so we love him. But he was talking about how they split it, but in this episode, out of the blue, they're talking about COVID-19. And you're just like, this is an episode where you kind of see them foreshadowing what was coming without knowing. And now you don't know, you're kind of like, okay, we know you're going to film again. But The Mandalorian, all of those shows kind of ended. And you're just like, oh, I can wait till September. And I keep telling people, well, you might have to wait longer. Think of it like Game of Thrones. We had to wait a long time for Thrones to come back on. And it was worth the wait, so let's get everybody healthy so we can film and get this on. But I do hope Saturday Night Live figures a way to broadcast because we need it. We need to laugh. They've been on point. Last season was one of their best seasons ever. And it wouldn't be election season if we don't have them doing election specials. So,
you know what? No. I mean, yeah, particularly that's, with the election coming up. Saturday Night Live is that it goes hand in hand with that show. So without that, would be an enormous loss. And yeah, I mean, anyone that thinks they're going to get their shows back in September. I mean, look, remember we waited there was a lapse in The Sopranos for 2 years. I remember there was a 2-year lapse before we got new episodes, and then it came on. And so yeah, we're going to have to just wait and be patient. And in the interim, you have plenty of options now. There's plenty of places to go to and plenty of choices. But also get out and get some fresh air.
Absolutely. And when you do go out, to add to that, make sure you PSA, wear your mask. Don't be one of those people.
Wear your mask.
Yeah, wear your mask. I don't know why then we're not going to be political and get on topic, but wear your mask. Go outside, get the exercise. I think that's key. so much. Go out. We have sunlight. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Go out. We got the sun. Well, it's not out today, but it's because it's not July 5th here yet. And once it becomes July 5th, the sun peaks out. And until late October, we have the best weather on the planet because we don't get above like 90. And it's sunny and beautiful. And we have mountains with snow on top of them. And occasionally it'll rain overnight and cool everything down again so you get happy. But I'm looking forward to that. I love the sunlight. So go out, wear your mask. But at least when you're inside, you don't have to wear your mask. And you can watch Mark's amazing recommendations and maybe a few of mine. Mine are probably too violent for most people to watch. They're like, what does he watch? I mean, and don't watch the news. That's really depressing. Don't. Just.
Yeah, just keep your intake of the news, which is what I do. I
watch Trevor Noah. That's where I get my news now. Trevor Noah provides me my news every day on his show on Comedy Central. And I'm not kidding. Yeah. I mean, that's where I used to get my news was Jon Stewart back in the day. I mean, I like to laugh and kind of learn at the same time. I can't do the network news. But anyways, I appreciate you. Oh, by the way, before you go, I totally agree with you about, well, I don't. But network TV's not dead because my mother-in-law, shout out to Tammy, she loves Survivor.
So do I. My favorite show.
See? Okay, I know now 2 people who watch it because I'm always like, is my mother-in-law the only reason why this show stays on? No way. Big Brother, all of those shows that she loves. I mean, she's always calling me up. And, she was the one who called me up. Eric, do you have CBS All Access yet? And I'm like, no, why? Have you watched Picard? And she's like, goes down the list. So whenever we're together, it's always like this laundry list of shows have you watched. And my wife and I feel bad because we have our kids. We're not when we watch TV, we sit down, it's at night, and we binge watch late into the night because that's our time. We like our popcorn, we put our food down, we put our phones down, and we get into, we absorb by it because we spend so much time talking about it. But we'll go off of your recommendations, and I will second Orthodox. Oh my God. If I had more thumbs to put up, I would. I only have 2. So
I'll tell your mother-in-law, but that by the time this airs, there's a possibility there'll be news of the new season of Big Brother because it is coming. It is apparently going to be returning players. There's going to be a variety of different people. So it is expected to premiere at the end of this month. I thought by now they would have announced it. My only concern is there seems to be a number of rising cases of the coronavirus in LA, so I don't know if that's the reason they haven't announced it yet, but it looks like they are going to move forward. We will have a summer season of Big Brother. Survivor apparently is coming back in the fall, but they have not said what it's going to be yet, so I don't know. Normally
just wake up and survive. That's what it's just survive another day in America. Can you do it?
I've never missed an episode of Survivor in 40 editions, however many there have been. It's been on for 20 years. I've seen every episode of Survivor. And what a strange way for the season to end with Tony Blachis winning $2 million at home with his wife and 2 kids. I'm like, why? It kind of took away from it, but It is what it is, and enjoy what's out there, awesome. And hopefully we'll have Big Brother back very soon.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. As always, we'll have you back in just a few short weeks to give your recommendations, because sooner than later you're going to show up here and we're going to start talking about fall TV, which will be scary, and then sooner or later we'll be talking about holiday picks. I do know in July a lot of networks are showing Christmas specials. I've been reading a lot about those, so if you're one of those people who needs to get a Christmas fix in July, you're sick in the head, for one, my opinion, and 2,
right.
It's like, why do you don't need to watch Christmas specials. It's fine. I tell my wife it's cool.
Now, Christmas in July, that's what they do.
Well, on a side note, XM Radio, I listen to it in my office besides in my car, and they now offer the holiday channel year-round. So if you need a Christmas fix on music, XM has that channel available for you. And I'm just like, why? What sicko is listening to this?
Eric, it's very simple. If you need your Christmas fix, I'm sure everyone has It's a Wonderful Life on DVD. Sure. Pop it in, watch it, and you'll tear up at the end like I do. I've seen it 100 times. And that's but I only watch It's a Wonderful Life during the holidays.
That's how I feel about Die Hard. I only watch Die Hard during the Christmas season.
It's a holiday movie, right?
It is. People argue with me that it's not, but the first 2 are Christmas movies.
It is, absolutely. It's a holiday movie.
It is. Absolutely. So, perfect. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate you, my friend. Have a great 4th of July weekend. We'll see you in a few short weeks. And make sure you go check out Mark and all his recommendations and leave us a message on our YouTube channel what you think of his recommendations, and if you need any more, Mark will answer those because we'll tell him that they're
I
there. Give him your feedback on what you think about his list. So, Mark, thank you so much, my friend, and have a happy 4th of July.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thanks. And that is a wrap for Fan Friday. I hope you all enjoyed it. It was fun. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Butch Patrick, and, of course, our good friend of the show, Mr. Marc Berman. Thank you, Mark, for joining us again today. We love you both. We're excited. Make sure you go check out and follow both of them on social. Remember, if you want to find out more information about our guests and learn more, if you're watching on YouTube, scroll down and you'll see it in the links. It'll all be listed. Also, how to connect with our show. And keep in mind, while you're watching, to always like, subscribe, and share. That helps us grow and get the reach out there so more folks like you can continue watching our show. And we love you because of it. So thank you all so much. Now keep in mind, tomorrow we have a special Saturday edition. And yes, I know, a few weeks ago I said I don't want to do Saturday shows. And now this is the second Saturday in a row we're doing one. But I'm so excited for tomorrow because, hey, it's our nation's birthday. We need a happy spot in the world. And what brings happiness is singing. What makes it even better is when the singing is done by a veteran and a retired law enforcement officer. He's an actor, he's a comedian, and he is one amazing singer. Here to sing some amazing songs for us on July 4th at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, will be the one and the only Phil Paz. I'm so excited to have our good friend of the show on our show to ring in July 4th, one of my favorite times of years, because no matter what, we get together, we have a barbecue, and even if it's just my family, it's still amazing to go celebrate the freedom of living in the greatest nation in the world. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I may come across very rough sometimes when it comes to where I think we're headed, but we do live in the greatest country in the world, and I've been to a whole bunch of Turb countries, and I can tell you, hands down, no matter how crazy it is, no matter who sits in that house at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, we still have the greatest country in the world. Yep, it may be a little chaotic at times. Like right now, the whole country kind of reeks of burnt popcorn. You know what I mean? When you leave the popcorn in for that minute and a half that they swear is perfect for your microwave popcorn, and it turns out it's not. That's where we're at. But it doesn't mean we can't celebrate. And one of the great things that we get to do, and I think push the message across for July 4th, is remember to register to vote. The only way we solve our country's problems is celebrate another freedom we have, which is the power to vote. And never before have we needed the power to vote than now. So remember, in 2020, the way that your voice works is that you speak up. And to do that is you have the power of voting. So if you don't know where to go check it out. Go to your local website, type in register to vote, and you'll find it out. We're going to put the link in our YouTube so you can register to vote too. We'll make it easy for you because we all have to have a voice and use the freedoms that we have living in the greatest country in the world. So that's what we have for you. So don't forget to tune in tomorrow. We're excited. 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. Going to make this easy peasy, no lectures, just all America. We're going to celebrate the things we love about America. Would love for you guys to put requests in on what America songs you want. I already have my request in. It's Lee Greenwood, of course, you know. That is one of the greatest songs ever. Lee Greenwood is the man. I Only Feel It Right, coming from a veteran singing it. And that's right, I want Phil to sing to me. That's what I want, because he's amazing. So we're going to have him that. So send us your requests, send the messages. Make sure you tag Phil when you're doing it so he sees them, because that's how this works, right? We hype this. So check them out. Make sure to tag Phil, tag a friend. Come along, 45 minutes of just Americana. Then we'll send you on your way off to your barbecue to celebrate the greatest nation in the land. And then Monday, make sure you're back here, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. We're back with another amazing veteran, Marine Corps and Navy veteran and talk show host and veteran advocate and cannabis advocate and all around just bad, you-know-what, bad mamba jamba. We have the one and only Montel Williams is back. We're going to cover a lot of topics just like we did the last time. You don't want to miss that. And then we have a full week ahead of you of amazing guests. So make sure you tune in starting tomorrow. You get Sunday off. And then we're right back. So folks, I want to again thank you on behalf of our entire team here at To The Point. We want to thank you so much for tuning in. If you or someone else would like to be a guest on our show, please email us at hello@tothepointtv.com. One of us will respond to you and get you scheduled on our show. So we'd love it. So recommend yourself, recommend a friend. We want to hear from you. That'd be awesome. Also, make sure that you're following us on social media. Obviously, if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Thank you. So subscribe, like, do those fun things. But what we want you to do is also go check us out on Instagram and Twitter. So go check us out there. And both of those handles are at To The Point TV. Pretty simple. So go check us out there. So again, on behalf of our entire team, we thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a terrific Friday. Be blessed. And as always, I'm Eric Mitchell. Be safe. Be strong. Be smart. And God bless America.
Let's get to the point.